I've got Matt Callies on the show today from Loon Outdoors, an inside perspective from the product designer himself. This is episode 147 of the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show.
Welcome to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show, where you discover tips, tricks, and tools from the leading names in fly fishing today. We'll help you on your fly fishing journey with classic stories covering steelhead fishing, fly tying, and much more.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? Thanks for stopping by the Fly Fishing Show today. Matt Callies, the product designer for Loon Outdoors and the rep for about 12 big fly fishing companies, is on to share some stories of how he went from full-time fly fishing dirtbagger to full-time fly fishing industry leader. Before we get started, let's hear from our sponsors. Since 1977, the Fly Fishing and Tying Journal has long been considered the angler's magazine, with original how-tos and technical articles written by the best trout and steelhead anglers in the West. They are committed to sharing exceptionally written essays, fiction, poetry, and in-depth guides to fly tying and fly fishing. FTJ is one of my go-to magazines, and if you haven't checked it out recently, you can get started today by calling 1-800-541-9498 or heading over to the web at ftjangler.com. GotFishing.com is your trusted source of information with access to the world's best fishing trips. You'll never pay a dime extra for the trip you book, and in many cases, less than advertised. Find out where Got Fishing could take you by heading over to GotFishing.com today. That's GOTFishing.com, or reach them by phone at 208-630-3373. GotFishing.com, the easiest place to start your next fishing adventure. So without further ado, here's Matt Callies from Loon Outdoors. How's it going, Matt?
I'm doing well, and yourself?
Good, man. It's good to chat here. I was you're down. I think you're down. Where are you at? You're in California, right?
Yes. So I am in Redding, California.
Yeah, that's right, Redding.
Kind of. Yeah. So pretty far north. I would say I definitely live in Northern California.
That's right, Northern. Awesome. And I we were just talking about this a little bit off air, but yeah, I have a lot of definitely listeners down in that part of your area down there. So we're going to dig into a little bit on, whatever we want to talk about, maybe some fly tying, maybe some steelhead. But before we get into that, can you just talk about how you first got into fly fishing and then how you brought that into working for Loon and all the other companies?
Man, yeah, it was kind of crazy. So I was probably like a 10 or 11-year-old kid. We had like a family cabin on Puget Sound in Washington. And my uncle and my dad would always take me fishing and stuff like that. And my uncle used to just tell me stories about sea-run cutthroats and Dolly Varden on Puget Sound. And he and my uncle, I think, got me like a thrift store setup, glass rod and some fly tying materials, and kind of just taught me to cast in some sort of manner, probably horrible.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I kind of like got into it, kind of a weird bringing, but it was like stripping streamers in Puget Sound, during the summers for sea run cuts and Dolly Varden, because they were very much more prevalent back then. So that kind of just, something I just did throughout my adolescence, and then when I moved to Northern California in like early 2000s, ran into a cool fly shop called Ted Say Fly Shop, and Bob Grace there and Joe Kimsey kind of took me under their wing and then tricked me into tying a lot. And then I think I was tying some custom patterns for them, and just been kind of going ever since. So at nearly 40 now, in the next few days, I think I have a pretty good 30-year-ish run at fly fishing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's kind of my general upbringing. It was just like, get outdoors and fish. As a kid, we used to just get dropped off at golf courses with fly rods and weird poppers and get chased by marshals quite often. So
do you still do some a little bit of bass fishing these days?
Yeah. So we blend it up pretty good. And I mean, we're like here in Northern California, like especially the Redding area, it's probably one of the most blessed fishing areas in the world. We have two amazing lakes, 15 minutes away. So we have Shasta and a little lake called Whiskey Town. So most of the time we run up on Shasta, and we do there's a technique that's been developed up here on the fly rod with a bunch of my guide buddies like Hogan and guy Ryan Williams and dude John Fischetti. We do a float and fly. So we're tying balanced bait fish patterns and fishing rock walls and ledges. And it's pretty cool because you'll just throw it out there, and one cast you'll catch like a 24-inch native rainbow in Shasta, and then next one you catch like a 3-pound spot or smallmouth bass.
Crazy.
So yeah, so we mix it up. I mean, we have every species of bass, bluegill, tons of species of trout to go, brookies, browns, rainbows. Jump over the hill, you have steelhead. If you want to just get like ruined, we have all of the Spring Creek fisheries here where, the fish are just going to snub you. And then of course the lower Sac, which is just like a, giant trout factory.
Oh yeah, man. So you're in a good spot.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, most of it, most of my adventures revolve around the kids. That's kind of like my main priority though.
Exactly. It's cool how that works, isn't it? I think we were talking, our kids are the same age, and I had quite a while, a couple years ago, I had George Daniel on, and we were talking a little bit about getting kids into fishing, and that was his biggest tip. He said, don't, even when you go fishing, don't take your stuff at all. Just like, you know what I mean? Like it's for the kids. You got to make sure to focus on them. And, I think that's something I didn't think about a while back. I was kind of like, well, I'll do a little fishing on myself and then I'll get the kids into it. But do you find that as well, that you just really, you kind of focus on them, and that's the trip, right?
Yeah. I mean, that 99% of the time, every once in a while we'll have like a tough day and they'll be like, so I run a 6 and an 8-year-old in a drift boat.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so they've been doing that actually since they were like solo trips, me and the kids, since they were probably 4 and 6.
Oh, wow.
So we've been doing that for a few years. And I think my 6-year-old this year finally landed his set. Well, it's not finally, but some people will cringe at this, but he has 7 trout over 20 inches.
Dang.
So,
that's amazing.
He is quickly turning into a guide. If there's somebody else in the boat, he's standing on top of the cooler, barking orders, yelling to mend.
No kidding.
Set the hook. Yeah, like if you want to be demoralized, let a 6-year-old tell you how horrible you're doing for 4 hours.
Damn.
But they're both fishy kids, and they have a healthy respect and understanding of like the river. So they've never stepped out of line, I guess you would say, but it's fun. But yeah, we just go float, eat lunches on islands, and catch as many trout as we can.
Man, do you see them? You've been doing in the fly fishing space for a while. What would you see? Would you, if you came out and they became guides or would you like that, to see them in the industry down the line? I mean, I know that's a long ways away.
Yeah, I mean, it would be really cool. They're pretty. I mean, they're pretty humble about it, so they have the right mentality, And yeah, I mean, the industry is always changing, and they're learning, and it'd be fun to see what they could do in an industry like this. There's a lot of cool people out there that, like, I know that were basically raised in this industry, and they live super happy, fulfilled lives. Better, it's traditionally better than a 9-to-5 in front of a computer, I'd say, if you get to be outdoors and experience things. So
exactly.
And if you can make a decent living at it, then you're ahead of the game, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, there's a few different ways. I mean, I've now, with approaching 150 episodes, I've interviewed pretty much every type of person that's trying to make a business in fly fishing. And, it's been interesting to hear, because I've heard all the different stories. I mean, what do you think is the best thing about what you do? And maybe you could talk a little about what you're doing now and who you're working with, and then dig into a little bit of, what's kind of the best of it, the best and the worst of what you do.
So I do kind of a lot. It, I think everybody, I think first and foremost, people a lot of times will misjudge how big fly fishing really is.
How big is it? Because I think we've talked a lot about that, talking always about how small of a niche it is. But what do you mean by how big it is?
Well, I think guys just, I think guys think you just make money like hand over fist or something. And
Oh,
it's
right.
like, they're like, man, you're making all this money. And you're like, where's that at? Like,
Right. No.
I'm not here because I want to become super wealthy. I would have picked a different career.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think sometimes people overinflate like the size of what we do and stuff like that. And I always equate it back to like this. I got the chance to meet this gentleman. I was at IFTD ICAST when it was still a
Yep.
joined unit, down in Florida. And, before the show opens, you can get in there like an hour early because you're a vendor or distributor and stuff. And I got to meet this guy, and gentleman walks up to me and very polite, well-spoken, well-mannered guy goes, "Hi, how are you doing?" Like, I was looking at conventional gear because I always take what those guys do and try to apply it into fly fishing.
Exactly.
Because, there's like this, that's just my thought process on it. And I turn around and my boy watches bass fishing like all of the time. So I recognize this guy. I'm like, dude, this dude's like number 2 on like the Bass Pro circuit right now, and ended up having like a 45-minute to an hour long conversation with him about kids and stuff like that. And most humble human ever. And then I met some like young kid that was like super, he was like, I don't want to like be harsh on him, but he was young and he was super stoked to be at this big event. And all he did was talk about how big he was.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, okay, well, we're in fly fishing. So it's like, it's a cool, it's the raddest thing ever. Like, it's a cool industry and like, but we're not that cool. Like, we're not Shakira or something, we're never going to like some international superstar type person,
No.
type thing. So I was like, you got to chill it out a bit. Like, I just talked to this dude that probably makes more money telling somebody that he flosses his fish with like Bubba's Weight Company than I'll ever make in a year.
Right. Right.
But yeah, it's a cool industry. And as far as what I do in here, so I'm a director of product development and national sales manager for Loon Outdoors.
Mm-hmm.
And so I take basically all the tools and ideas and products that Loon makes. Most of them originate in my head while driving as a rep somewhere in the southwest of the United States. And so yeah, it's kind of an interesting job. So I don't have a formal degree in chemical engineering or 3D CAD or anything like that, but through tinkering, reading, and understanding documents that would probably bore most humans to death, like I understand like what I'm doing, right?
Yeah.
So designing new floatants, like we just came out with a new floatant called Fly Dip, which is not only fish safe, but it's like human skin safe. It's not going to, its toxicity levels to humans. I mean, you'd have to like, it's actually really funny because all the toxicity reports are like, how much do you have to put in a bucket of water to kill a rainbow trout because they consider it a sensitive species. So it's interesting to see that, but you would have to, I don't know if we can sell you that volume of this product kind of a thing.
No.
So, it's cool, like designing chemical stuff, doing 3D CAD, fit finish, everything kind of just comes out of my brain and like my home office / shop.
What's a new product that's come out, recently that somebody might not know about, or maybe they know about?
Well, it's the newest one is probably Fly Dip, and it's a dip floatant. It's CDC safe. It's like when we were in testing, we had one of our ambassadors spill it down his waders and into his drift boat.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy guides on the Deschutes.
Who was it?
Jeremiah Hool.
Oh, Jeremiah. Okay.
Yeah, aka Jeremiah Super Spay on Instagram.
Okay.
He's now actually, I kicked him off the ambassador team. He was nothing but trouble, but I hired him as my Pacific Northwest rep. I was like, you don't get to be an ambassador and get a,
Right.
all this other, like we're gonna move you here, brother. But yeah, he was telling me that he'd spilt this down his waders and he'd step into the Deschutes and there was like an air bubble trapped around this area.
Wow.
So it's like a triple hydrophobic compound that's, completely inert, CDC safe, like I said, works for like your Dorsey style indicators, doesn't destroy foam. And the hardest part is that it has to be environmentally friendly.
Yeah.
So
that's it.
And, that becomes like a pretty weird term for people because.
And why does it have to be? I mean, obviously environmentally friendly is good, but you think of things like lead and stuff like that, right? Which is kind of still out there. So why does your stuff, is that part of the company, part of the, the way you guys do things?
So yeah, it's one, like Loon, our initial like mantra or mission statement, whatever, it's just fishing with a conscience. And, so everything, like we don't make any products with like, you brought up lead, which is a great point and topic. And, so we make a 10 split shot option and we do tungsten putties. And
do you guys do lead?
No, not at all.
That's it. You don't do lead. That's awesome.
No. And basically everything that we make, has to, nothing in the world will ever be environmentally perfect if you can take that, like, for what it's worth.
No. Yeah.
Because if it was environmentally perfect, it would be nothing.
Yeah. There's always going to be some impact. There's always going to be some impact no matter what you do, right?
Right. Exactly. But like by taking stuff and trying to shift it to the most minimal impact possible, as our sport grows and more people are on the water, more people are on sensitive watersheds, if you go out there and you lose 30 nymph rigs in a day or something, have a really bad day.
Yep.
And you're using big chunks of lead shot, like that all rolls downhill.
Yep.
And, when you really think about it, say if you're fishing in a mountain stream, like say if you're in Mount Shasta and fishing the upper stack, that then goes down into Lake Shasta. Lake Shasta drains into the lower stack. Everybody along there, all the way to San Francisco, is utilizing that as their drinking water source.
Yeah.
And, you compound that stuff over like, say 50 years of fishing. There's an impact there. And, for like a guy who's like donating to like TU and restoration products to like look at you and go, 10 split shot doesn't work well.
All right.
I need to use lead. And it's like,
no.
So wait, you're just trashing what you're like, I don't, so yeah, everything that we do with Loon is just going to be as environmentally sound as possible, trying to decrease the carbon footprint. Like,
who else is doing that, Matt? When you look at the other companies that have the terminal tackle and all that stuff out there, I guess in the in the fly, are there a lot of companies that are doing that where it's like you can't even get lead from them, or would you say you guys are the unique situation?
I would say that we are the unique situation. There's nobody. I mean, I think there's like a few guys that do like a tungsten offering.
Yeah.
I've tested all of the tungsten split shot, and unfortunately, not to sound super nerdy, but like the smelting process, which is basically the melting process of how you manipulate metals into shapes. Like tungsten, I think, I forget the exact number, but it's too brittle and it like smelts at like 4,800 degrees or 6,400 degrees. So it's not a malleable metal that you can click on and click off like say lead, which is ideal because of its weight and softness. So yeah, I mean, we're pretty unique
You know what the cool thing about that is, Matt? And we've talked a little bit about Patagonia. I think sometimes maybe people get tired of hearing about it, but it's a good example. You know what I mean? The way they've done it, because Chenard, back in the day, he was kind of doing the same thing, man. I mean, they were the only ones with organic cotton, T-shirts, and he pretty much just said, like, dude, this is what we're gonna do, and I don't care, what it takes. And it sounds like
Right.
you guys are I mean, does it come down from your founder? Where does this stuff come down from on Loon's kind of the thinking here, where you guys are just doing this stuff?
So the original owner was like a super smart guy, and I think it kind of all came from him from the early 90s when we started. And that was just when the new owner like kind of bought it at this like juncture, and that's just been our program ever since. I think I'm about to enter my 8th year at Loon. So, everything as you see, like, I mean, say like UV fly tying resin and stuff like that, like you see all these new companies come out, and you're like, cool, wow, okay, somebody else is doing UV resin.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I mean, and I'll be completely honest, if you looked at my like workstation, I have everybody's resins, and they stink.
Really?
Like,
you mean literally?
Yeah,
stink?
like, yes, like the actual off-gassing smells. And I'm not saying that ours has zero odor,
mm-hmm.
but it's much more the impact of, it goes right back to impact again.
Yeah.
But yeah, taking like what, the stuff like Patagonia does, like we have a lot of really good friends over at Patagonia.
Uh-huh.
And I would say, I mean, I can't ever say that, oh yeah, we're like Patagonia,
Right.
because their capabilities and everything that's amazing that they can do is on another level than probably what we could ever do.
But it all started, if you think about it, right? It started with that one guy who somehow he embedded his whole thinking right into the company. And is that kind of with you guys? It sounds like, I mean, because you're embedded on this thought. I mean, where does your conservation, ethic, does it come from Loon, or do you just have that even without Loon?
It's totally been pre-Loon, for me at least, doing stream cleanups, and I mean, just whatever. And it's funny, like, to have, I mean, just even like if you see something out in the wild, it's like, dude, I have this huge pack. There's like 2 boxes in there, and you pick up a bunch of junk because people have left it behind.
Yeah.
And like it's cool to see, like with my kids, like they'll see something in a river or on a lake, and they'll be like, that doesn't belong there, and they pick it up, and which is always scary as a dad, because you're like, wait, what are you picking up?
Exactly. And I saw that recently. I was up on a stream in an amazing place. It was pretty remote, but I think it was kind of some squatter. I don't know. They were camping out there, man, and they just left. I mean, they dug a toilet pit, like literally within 10 feet of the river. They left a bucket with poop in it. I mean, it was just absolute, just terrible. You know what I mean? Like, that's the stuff that's tough to see, isn't it? I mean, there's so much of that stuff out there.
Yeah. And, there's, and with more people getting into outdoor sports, and it's not just fly fishing, You can insert any outdoor activity. It's like, I grew up most of my time hiking like as a kid, like backpacking through the Sierras, and like lying to my parents that we were like over at, we're going to Joe's house for 2 nights for a big sleepover. And we're like jetting off at 16 to do like a 40-mile loop up in the Sierras to try to like peak bag something that you need a permit for, but we were going to cheat the system and do it at night.
Really? So nobody knew where you were at. That's awesome.
No. Yeah. There was no cell phones. It was like, pagers, and like all our parents thought we were at like our friends' houses, and, we're on top of like some 12,000 foot peak in the middle of the Sierras, like 7 hours away.
What was that movie? Remember the movie, that guy that got his hand trapped in the rock and had to cut his arm off?
Yes. Yeah. Like that kind of, unintelligent maneuver,
Yeah.
like, but, like, well, he, what is it? I think that's Aaron Ralston.
Yeah.
But he was, I mean, Yeah, we were just doing it as like dumb, like being dumb kids.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
let's go see how many peaks we can run up this week or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And um, but yeah, I mean, like the whole conservation. I mean, it's like one of the things like with Loon that makes me the most stoked, and but it's also the hardest part of my job. Because most of the time it's you want to create a product that
Yeah, the easy
is
way.
equally as good. Yeah, that's right, exactly. It's like, man, like the Fly Dip product. The easy way would have been to use like a hydrocarbon, and hydrocarbons are things like gasoline or petroleum based stuff. And I mean, I could have walked to like the local auto parts store, picked up 3 products, and made that thing work in 3 days. And instead, it took 7 months to find the right inert chemical to evaporate the way we needed it to, and also not, be bad for the people or fish or the environment.
That's cool.
So
That's cool.
yeah, it's just kind of it's challenging enough where it keeps your mind thinking and you're looking at stuff. And
Yep.
the industries you pull this stuff out of you're like, huh, I had no idea these people use this stuff.
Huh. No kidding.
you can end up on some pretty weird
Tangents.
and learning about how to, it's like, how do you make this? How do you make
Huh.
Oh wow, this is it's just super, not to divulge any trade secrets that I'm found, but
Yeah, no, this is awesome. I love this, Matt, because it's just a cool conversation, because I think, again, back to the Patagonia or whoever, I mean, you guys, probably are doing stuff, obviously you're leading things a little bit here, but people that are listening to this now might not know about that, right? And they're going to be like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Why wouldn't I buy a Loon product that has less impact? You know what I mean? So, from a business perspective, obviously Patagonia shows that being conservation, being hardcore on that, works, right? You got your people.
Right.
And so, hey, I want to dig in on, there's a bunch of stuff here, obviously with Loon and everything, but I did want to just circle back around to your background, because you have a few other companies. Can you talk about, other than Loon, who else you're working with?
Oh man. Yeah. So I'll list them alphabetically because that's just kind of how my brain works.
Yeah.
But so I work with Abel fly reels, which is they're a really cool brand.
Yep.
I mean, there's a bunch of cool fly reels out there, and you don't have to own the fanciest one. I won't ever tell anybody that.
Oh,
but
Abel is the one that when you think Abel, you just think like they've always got this badass, crazy design. I mean, that's the first thing that comes to my mind. And they've been like, I remember 20 years ago when it was like, man, what is that reel? It's like, okay, Abel, they're different.
Right. So I do Abel, and you would laugh because I am such like a stealth operating type guy. Like, I'm not bright and flashy. So like all of the Abels that I fish are non-fish graphics. They're matte finished. And it's like, I went with like matte charcoal gray and matte green.
Are you serious? You don't have, so if you had to choose, if you went to Abel and you were going to throw a graphic on there, what would it be?
Right now it's, oh man. Actually, I really, for whatever reason, dig their Yamame, which is like a Japanese trout, little Japanese trout. Like, I just dig that graphic for whatever reason.
Cool.
And it's not a fish that I've ever caught, but someday I'd love to go to Japan and catch that fish, just because I think the Japanese fly fishing culture is like super rad.
Yep.
And Japanese culture in general. So,
yep.
So like, that's like a weird one. It's like, I want to get like a steelhead or anything like that.
Right.
I'd get this crazy Japanese trout. So I do Abel. I work with Air-Flo, which, makes, oddly enough, just to kind of fit into the story. They don't use PVC in their fly lines. So they use polyurethane, and PVC is outlawed by like every EU country, basically. Like it's dead technology, right? They don't allow, it's like, it's super harmful to you. It's a carcinogen. It's all this jazz.
Are there a lot of line companies still using the PVC?
Everybody's changing their tech right now. Yeah. And, I don't know what everybody's actually doing, but I know there are a lot of PVC based lines.
Yep.
Everybody keeps that close to their chest. But, Air-Flo's been polyurethane since like day one. They've had low stretch cores, which I think is cool since they're for a long time. And they're just cool people. They have cool, like the whole culture there has been super fun to work with, and like working on lines and testing lines. And it's a fun thing. Like, hey, wow, this thing does this and that, and, lines for every different application.
Yeah.
So I do airlock, which is, we had the screw bottom, indicator system.
Uh-huh.
And this year they got rid of the plastic ball, and they went to an EVA style foam, like this like soft foam.
Yep.
And they put a chemical in there now, actually. So after 18 months, if you had broke your rig off and it goes floating down the stream, 18 months after being exposed to the bacteria in, say, like a river or soil system, the whole product actually will biodegrade.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's kind of cool. I do a really cool headwear company called Capture. We do, custom headwear for people, shops, fly fishing companies, all that. I picked up a really fun artist named Casey Underwood. I always loved his art and everything. So we do like stickers and hats. I work with Tim Rajeff up there at Echo. So I do all the Echo product. I do Firehole sticks. Joe and Deb are, husband and wife team. They obviously have some more minions now because they're growing. So we do hook speeds and cool body weight systems all out of tungsten and brass. Fully Mill Flies, which is a European company. A lot of people don't really recognize them, but they're here in the States. But I think it's probably the oldest fly tying company in the world.
Oh wow!
Yeah, like I think it dates back to like the 30s or 40s or something. Like they opened their first commercial factories. So they do a lot of really progressive tungsten flies, pretty technical stuff. They call it nymphing in Europe, not Euro nymphing, but so they've been on the jig and like tungsten bead oversized program for like a super long time. So they've been on my radar probably since I was ordering things like out of Czechoslovakia and languages I didn't know to tie certain styles of flies. So obviously I work with Loon, Ross. I do Ross reels, which is really cool because a little known fact is so most of my companies kind of if you look at it, they either started or their founders were kind of from California as well. So Abel started in California. Anything with Tim Rajeff. Tim's a San Francisco Golden Gate Casting Club golden boy. Like that's where he and Steve cut their teeth with the Kriegers and stuff like that. Then Ross was actually founded in a small town called Etna.
Oh yeah.
And if you drove, and there's nothing in Etna really. I mean, it's not a really big town. And so I have on my shelf up here, I have a ton of Etna made Ross reels, and I collect them like Pokemon. I have every one I see. I don't care the condition. I just want it. It's a piece of history.
And now a quick word from our sponsors. GotFishing.com, a boutique booking agency for fishing adventures around the world. Got Fishing is unique in working with a small hand-selected group of outfitters from around the world that are known for providing an experience that is second to none. Got Fishing can be your trusted source of information with access to the world's best fishing trips. Their sole purpose is to help you plan the most authentic fishing adventure while making sure it fits within your budget. The beauty is that everything they do is 100% free. You will never pay a dime extra for your trip, and in many cases, less than advertised. I can attest personally to the service that Got Fishing provides, as they have been working with me closely to set my first trip to the Yucatan for saltwater. They have taken care of all the important details and allowed me to avoid worrying about any of the complications. I know Brian and the crew have you covered at Got Fishing. Whether you need a fishing consultant, travel consultant, gear pro, or the like, they have you covered. With top-of-the-line outfitters they represent around the world, they are confident they have just the right trip for you. You can give them a call at 208-630-3373 or head over to gotfishing.com to get started today. Let Got Fishing help you plan the fishing trip you've been dreaming about. I forget that in the center are rivers and fish unspoken for. that there are valleys, the strata of which we lower into perhaps in the hollow between breaths. In the tiny pause between the rise of summer and its departure, I nearly forget the long sieve of winter, the absence, the fractional glimpses of light. Dear one, I will go without speaking. Ablaze, keep me until I disappear. That was a poem by Molly Dam in the summer edition of the Fly Fishing and Tying Journal. On top of some great poetry, as you hear here, FTJ is jam-packed with another round of great articles in diverse departments. Joseph Rosano is back again, provides another classic steelhead lesson for everyone. We hear from Garrett Lesko in a stacking deer hair frenzy. Find out about striped bass from Angelo Peloso. And hear from Dave McNeese on singing the blues of material dyeing. Lots of additional articles in the summer edition, including an editor's interview with yours truly about how I became a fly fishing podcaster. Craig did a really good job with this one, so I'm pretty proud to be in this edition. I believe I have found the perfect sponsor for the show. It would be really great if you can support FTJ by heading over to ftjangler.com and subscribing so you don't miss any of the tips, tricks, and stories in the next issue. That's ftjangler.com to get started today. And tell Craig and the crew out there you heard about the magazine from the podcast, and I'll find a way to put something extra special together for you. Okay, back to the show. What happened to? I'm not sure if you could talk about this, but this was interesting to me because I've interviewed a couple of Echo, big players with Echo on this show, and but what happened to the Echo Air-Flo thing? It seemed like it was such a perfect combination, right? I've got a lot of Air-Flo stuff in both, and they've kind of like split, right? Or is there any? Do you know what's going on there?
So Tim and Ray Jeff Sports, they were Air-Flo is owned by a European company.
Yeah, and
Tim was the United North American distributor.
Okay,
and I think the figureheads of the European side of the business decided to, hey, we're going to sell. And so they wanted to sell. And oddly enough, the same company that owns now Ross and Abel ended up purchasing it.
Oh, wow.
So the Mayfly Group, which owns Ross and Abel and a few other things that they just don't do anything with right now, are the new owners of Air-Flo.
There you go.
So the distribution of the lines, instead of being out of Vancouver, Washington, will be out of Colorado. Is my total, as far as I've gotten into the understanding of it.
That makes sense. Makes sense.
I try to. I mean, I just don't.
Yeah, you don't get into the minutia on that stuff.
Exactly. Like
from the outside, and obviously I'm not an insider on this, but what it looks like is and you hear from people that Ray Jeff and what he did was huge, obviously for Air-Flo in the U.S. Right? He promoted the crap out of that stuff, and then you're like, oh, and then there's this split. So it kind of looks like that thing, like, oh man, it's kind of a rough thing. It would but I'm sure, all this happens, right, in the industry. It's just business part of it, right?
Yeah. And that's and Tim was always super influential. I mean, you can't speak highly enough about Tim's brain and capabilities of line design, rod taper design, stuff like that. You can look at him and be like, I don't even understand where we've gone with this. And, talking about lines and tapers and stuff like that. And he's so brilliant at that stuff. And yeah, I mean, he was incredibly a huge player in the development of that.
Yeah. Of that stuff.
And I try to stay away from all of that.
You're doing you got your own stuff with all these companies. Now, are you done with Ross, or do you have more to add to that alphabet, to your line here?
No, there's more. So I'm also the Southwest rep for Scott Fly Rods, which was, as most people know, it was a San Francisco-based company, and so that's my super premium rod brand. We're still, and it's odd too, because so now I have, when I end up in Montrose, Colorado, and So now I have Ross, Abel, Air-Flo, and Scott all right there because they all moved to Montrose. It's kind of funny that like both of these Northern California companies, like i.e. Ross and Scott, both bailed out of California and ended up in Montrose, which is a lot like Redding. You know, it's not a huge town, and lots of agriculture, like in the foothills of just amazing fishing. And then the last one I do is trout hunter, leader, and tippet and tying materials.
Okay. Perfect.
So
perfect. You got a list there. So how do you know, you know, I mean, how many could you add to this list? Could you just have 50 companies? I mean, is there a limitation on what you do with them? And, you know, will you be adding more companies as you go?
I don't really, at this point, I don't really plan on adding. It's just not something, I mean, I'm happy where I'm at. My workload is, I think if I start adding, I have to hire employees and, you know, like a sub rep, like another rep to work under me.
Do people do that?
Absolutely.
Oh, wow. So people have sub reps.
Yes. Yeah. So, like a lot of the reps that you'll meet in this industry didn't just like show up one day and say, hey, dude, I'm going to be a fly fishing rep.
No.
And, you know, like they get hired either like, so I would say that I'm a really weird anomaly. So a lot of them they get hired by a rep who has this huge list of brands and, hey, you're going to cover this whole zone.
Oh, right.
And you're going to see these shops, but I'm still going to go to that zone and see all of my buddies.
Oh, wow. Look at that.
So, you know, like there's like a weird split to it. Like I've never looked into it, never really thought a ton about it.
But you could do that right now. For example, like I'm up in Oregon, and you probably have. Well, you know, for example, there might be something up here where I could be a sub rep, right, for you, and you can still come up and fish for steelhead on the Deschutes and all that stuff. But something like that, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So, and I mean, there's reps that have multiple sub reps, and you know, but for me, it's always like my workload's pretty significant. And you know, a lot of guys think of like the rep as like one of the most romantic jobs in the world. And I mean, there's a lot of office and computer work involved.
Let's get back to that too on that, because a while back I mentioned the best and worst. So if on the rep thing, what is so is that the worst part of it is the office stuff? And then what would be the best thing about being a rep?
No, you know, honestly, for me, it's like the hardest part, and I don't know if it's the worst or the hardest part because it's part of the job that I knew going into it, right? So I'd say instead of the worst, I'd say the hardest portion of it is, and you can relate this, you know, being a dad, I'm sure, is being 20 hours away from home, and like you get the phone call that your kid has pneumonia and he's going to the ER.
All right.
Like that's the worst feeling you can have.
Yep.
And, you know, in my personal scenario, my wife runs an ER. She's like the charge nurse of an ER. So like, I know that she's not like standard mom, you know, like she is like, I could like have my leg hanging off and she's like,
no big deal.
I don't know if we're going to fish. Yeah, it's not, you're fine.
Right.
You know, you break a finger, she like put tape on it. That's all we do there.
No kidding.
You'll be big boy, you know? But just that feeling of like not being able to be there and like help in a critical situation or a stressful situation. And obviously like the computer work stuff, like some people may hate that, but like it's part of the job. And I don't dislike it. I love going through the day and seeing shops succeed with stuff that I'm passionate about and seeing them become passionate about it. And the computer work's just kind of part of that reflection, I would say, like, you know, cause you gotta do it. The best parts, I mean, man, you drive a lot. Some people hate driving. I love driving.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm on the road 30 to 40,000 miles a year.
What do you drive? What are you driving?
So I just drive the smallest. I choose vehicles based off if I can fit everything in them.
Yep.
So, I have a tow vehicle like that I bought like many years ago. It's nothing fancy. I mean, it's it's like a 2011 one up from the base model Toyota Tundra. That's like my tow vehicle for like drift boats and bass boats and runabouts, all that jazz. But most of the time, 99% of the time, I drive a Subaru Forester base model.
Yep.
And I'm 2 years into that vehicle right now, and I'm at 80,000 miles.
There you go.
So
you're going to be up for a new vehicle here pretty soon.
It's every 5 to 6 years. Yeah. I mean, it definitely is like the sacrificial lamb of my job. Things I'm excited about is like, either a hybrid technology or, like the self-driving car thing, like in my head, I'm like, that scares the crap out of me. But how blissful would that be to be able to have like this integrated iPad thing on your dash, and you can just do business while this car drives you?
It's there, man. I mean, you hear about those people like with the Tesla, they're falling asleep in their Teslas, right? And they're still just driving down the highway.
Yes. Like, and I thought about like, I mean, a base model Tesla, like, unfortunately, you just don't get the mileage that you would need.
Oh, is that what it is? The base? So yeah, you can get into a Tesla now under $50K, right? Like they got reasonable models now.
Yeah, I mean that's still over double the cost of a base model Super.
Right.
As like if you're considering it as a business expense and stuff like that. But the time to charge, and then like your time on task. Some days you're running and gunning, and you're doing 2 to 3 appointments, and some of them might be.
Yeah.
You might do an appointment in the morning, and then you drive 200 miles, do another appointment in the afternoon that carries over into a dinner.
Yeah.
And you're like, by the end of that, like, unfortunately right now with the battery and charging technology and distance is capable.
It's not doable.
Yeah. I mean, just like from a business standpoint, you look at like time on task, downtime and all that stuff. It's just like, and let's face it, like when you're in some of these towns, there is not an electric vehicle charging station.
No.
Because trout tend to be in like these cooler, more small, remote locations.
That's
right. But I mean, I think it'll get there.
Yeah.
And I'm super hopeful that like, I'll have like a truck or a van that just goes down the road silently while I do my computer work.
Exactly. That's it. That's going to be there. Hey, Matt, before people would get angry at me if we didn't dig into some on a little bit on the fishing stuff. And I've been thinking about this. I've had a couple, we've talked about the Sacramento. It sounds like that's kind of your home river. Is that what you consider?
It's my backyard.
Water? Yeah, it's in your backyard. So the Sac. And then, so let's dig in just for a little sec here on steelhead, because we've talked a ton about steelhead. I've had, lots of episodes on steelhead, but we haven't talked about the Sac. Can you bring us to the Sac for steelhead and just break that down for somebody who's kind of new to it and maybe help them get their first steelhead down there?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's not really a set of guides that really target steelhead specifically on the lower Sac.
Why is that? To me, it seems like there's on our river, there's probably hundreds, right? Hundreds and hundreds of people, but why wouldn't there be a few guides out there?
It's hard to differentiate the valley steelhead versus our normal trout.
Oh yeah. Really? So when you mean differentiate being when you look at the two, you have a hard time seeing which one's a steelhead and which one's not?
Well, it's fairly easy. So say anything with a clipped fin, like an adipose fin removal, is 100% a hatchery steelhead. And there's a lot of times, like I've landed rainbows in the 27 to 28 inch category in the town of Redding.
Dang.
And yeah, that's a steelhead. Now per Fish and Game, I think it's like anything over 16 or 18 inches trout, or because you can't differentiate, right?
No.
Is technically a steelhead.
Yeah.
So, but it's interesting. And I don't want to talk trash on throwing bobbers and stuff like that, but like a lot of the program is indicator fishing, and there's a few guys that know where to go and squeak out swung fish. But it's not promoted.
Oh, it's not.
No, and it's funny, like you could just be in the middle of trout water and all of a sudden you're fishing like a PMD, a fish that comes up and tail walks like 7 times.
Huh.
And you look at it and you're like, dude, did you go to the ocean and come back? Like, but there's just not like a time of the year where it's like, oh, these fish are here right now for that I've ever personally seen.
So it's not like you go out there and you think, September, you're just going to be like, okay, the steelhead are here. Let's throw on our wet flies and swing for these steelhead in September and October. That's not the case there.
There's places you can do that, and you can go and target. That's like, there are known runs, but it's not what's popular.
Indicator, nymphing is popular.
Now, if you came to the Sac in September, October, like the amount of egg flies and rubber legs and stuff that you would see people fishing behind salmon reds, right? Because all of our trout and probably a good portion of our steelhead are going to go sit behind the salmon reds because it's like a giant Pez dispenser of, 10 mil orbs of magic coming out of the Chinook.
Damn.
And so yeah, it's kind of a different program. Now, if we bump over the hill, like towards the Trinity for 45 minutes, starting in like that early September time, yeah, you're fishing 100% for anadromous. Like, that's your target.
Gotcha.
I'm going to go fish for anadromous trout or steelhead,
Yep.
and the possibility of sea run brown.
Oh, wow.
Because there's a huge debate on whether or not the Trinity's brown trout population is anadromous or not.
Is the Trinity, maybe take us there. Let's talk just briefly about that a little bit then. What is it, take us to the Trinity. What's that experience like for steelhead, for swinging there?
So the Trinity swinging for steelhead is super awesome. And it's one of those things that's like a huge split. It obviously comes basically from it starts in the middle of California and then, flows down into the Klamath and then ultimately out to the Pacific Ocean. So it's a tremendously long river with every type of water that you would want. There's really technical, like nymphing water up higher. And a lot of the guides, it's more proximal to Redding and like, the I-5 corridor.
Oh, right.
So, that gets kind of hit more and more as far as like, nymph fishing and stuff like that. But as you get like lower and more remote, like towards the coast and like the confluence with the Klamath, the runs really open up and like you get those kind of really traditional gravel bars. And there's nothing like that place. I'm sure there's and that might just be like my own heart, like talking because it's like my home water.
Yeah.
And like, a guy who travels to like every steelhead stream is like, dude, that's just like this, and this. But it's a really cool area.
Nice.
And the fact that it's so close to home for me, it's, it can offer anything that you want as far as steelhead fishing.
On the Trinity, you mentioned earlier about the soft tackle, or the kind of soft tackle flies. What is that? What you're using there? Or what are you using? If you had to pick a couple flies on the Trinity, what would they be?
So one of my flies that my favorite, and it's an older pattern that I've had commercially tied, and I think I ended up giving it to Doug Brudico over at Aquaflies.
Oh,
I think he's doing it now. And like Doug and he was like, hey man, I need this fly. And I was like, cool. He's like, well, what do you want? And I was like, just tie the fly. And like, he's like, you don't want roses? I was like, dude, I don't care.
Right.
Like,
yep.
I'd rather have people just be stoked out. So that's a fly called the Perpetrator.
Okay.
And basically it's just a big beadhead soft tackle. And by big, I mean, it's the whole fly is basically an inch long.
Mm-hmm.
Has a little, I think it started off with like a C14S Gamakatsu hook. I don't know what Doug's using now, but it's stout and I fished it. And it's just this big beadhead soft tackle thing. And it's weird because you can go and high stick it through a run, like on a spay rod, like if it's like kind of pockety water. And then, take you like 10 steps down and then go swing it through the run. And it's just as equally as effective.
Nice.
So stuff like that. I tried just a ton of really weird soft tackle variations.
Mm-hmm.
And we were kind of talking earlier about like intruders.
Yeah.
And do I fish intruders or stuff like that? And Not really. And if I do, they're really, really small ones.
Mm-hmm.
Just because, I forget if, no, it wasn't this year. It was the year before. I think I landed like a 10 to 13 pound steelhead on the Trinity,
Nice.
which is a big Trinity fish.
Yeah.
Um, and it ate something like an inch long in the middle of winter, like January, snowing, storm cycles
Yeah.
happening.
They're kind of trouty down there too.
Yeah, those fish just get super trouty so fast to me. Um, and they're a different fish. They're not as acrobatic as, like, in my opinion, as like the coastal fish.
Oh, okay.
Um, like when you get like true coastal fish less than a mile from salt, that you're
Right.
swinging that intrudery, prawny, kind of just really, you're just trying to piss them off,
Yeah.
versus the Trinity. It's like, I think guys go over there with like 7 weights and stuff like that. And most of the time, like if I'm not throwing, like maybe I'm throwing a 7 weight single hand rod, like a little 1 hand spay rod with like like a rage head on it. Or maybe a 5 weight 2-hander. Like I love the Scott L2H over there. It's a little 5 weight. And I'll even get as light as like 4 weights during the like October caddis come off really well over there. And you can go over there with like a little 4-weight spay and like, yeah, you're going to hook a 26-inch steelhead, like I'd fish the same rod. Some guys are like, oh, you need more rod. And I was like, no, I mean, the water's low, like if the water's low and smaller, more intimate water, you're not just stomping in there with this big, heavy system, right? A little bit more delicate, I guess would be the terminology.
Totally. Well, let's take us out here. I usually do the 222, which is top 2 tips, top 2 flies, top 2 resources, and let's stick on the Trinity here. You mentioned one, the Perpetrator. Would you have another fly you would throw, another name fly we might be able to Google up or find out there?
Yeah, I mean, so it might sound really weird, but like I love just bunny leeches over there,
Yeah.
really small ones. Nothing beats the movement of rabbit, and steelhead seem to love rabbit fur.
Yeah.
So anything that's kind of bunny leechy, like honestly, to this day, I'll probably have 20 egg sucking leeches in every colorway from sculpiny browns, to purpley blacks, stuff,
Yeah.
in my box at any time. And, realistically, I just have a ton of different, if you're a tire, like my bead head size is just very based upon my fishing application, I guess.
Yeah. Gotcha. Okay. And what about, if we're on the Trinity, we're fishing there, we're swinging, we're up there trying to find a steelhead. Would you have a tip or two you might give somebody to help them find that fish?
Just cover water.
Yeah.
A lot of times guys they see a run and, oh my God, this is the spot.
Right.
And I mean, I might spend 3 hours driving around in an 8-hour day fishing different spots, because a lot of those fish, as they're pushing through that system, those fish are covering, they're not holding down there, like down lower in like the swingy water stuff on the lower part of the river. They're going upstream. They're going to go upstream and hang, and some fish will hang there, but the majority of the fish they kind of seem to push up, for me, at least. So your best days are going to be when you find fish that are chilling for a day or resting or, holding up. So you got to cover that water.
Yeah.
And a lot of times if you find one, you're going to find more. So, rest your water, go back, try something different. It's like dating girls, and, I always think of steelhead as supermodels. You're going to go up to them and they're going to reject you. And you're going to dang, now what do you got to come back with something different. So you get something that's a little bit more peacocky or a little bit more drab, trying to see like what this supermodel wants.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of just go back through there a little bit different, like colors or size of, fly, speed of the fly, stuff like that. And, you just kind of keep at it. Don't give up,
Are you getting a lot of action, on the swing? Are you getting fish that are coming up and like tipping it and kind of messing with it and not taking it?
Yeah. It was, it was pretty funny. I took, our Japanese distributor, is named Masa, and he does like Loon and like Scott, like done a ton of stuff over in Japan. And his son was studying in San Francisco actually. So he came up and we did a steelhead trip. We got into runs, and I'm kind of standing up and behind him and watching his fly. And you would just see fish just like come up and just like a flash, like just roll on it.
Yeah.
And like, you know, you're waiting, like, come on, you're waiting for the line to jump. But they're a curious creature. So I always say that fish don't have hands, so they have to feel with their mouth.
Yep.
You know, so that they come up and they might swipe at it or bump it, see what it does. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you'll see fish, like, especially when you're skating flies,
Mm-hmm.
and you'll see a fish come up and just be so inquisitive, like, what is this? What is this? Like 5, 6, 7 times. You put it through there at a different speed, and all of a sudden he can't handle himself anymore. Right. He's got to go grab it. So yeah, you can get a lot of there, and a lot of times, because the river's so clear, a lot of times, like, you'll see a fish move on it, or you'll see a fish move on your buddy's fly, and you're just like, you know, he doesn't even know what's going on, but your heart's going like 150 beats per minute. Yep. And then like all of a sudden it gets to the inside of the swing, and you're like, dude, that fish didn't take it. That sucked.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you tell him, and he's like, wait, what? You didn't tell me. I was like, I didn't want you. No, hey, there's a fish coming. That takes the whole excitement out of that grab.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly. And that's on the so what would be other than the Trinity, is there like what would be the steelhead river you would love to fish today if you could go anywhere in the country, or anywhere in the world? I guess you could just say, because you could throw in whatever, right? I don't know if you want to. I'm not sure how far you've got around with your steelheading, but it sounds like, are you more kind of Northern California based, or have you've been out in some other areas?
No, I mean, I've been all up through BC and, you know, Oregon and Washington, stuff like that. My previous life, I was like firefighter and paramedic, and I lived out of the back of a truck for like 4 years. So on my days off, like, you know, you have 20 days off a month. I would go and adventure and fish places. Yeah. So, you know, no wife, no kids.
Yep.
Like, responsibility level was like sub $500 a month. Nice. For like, you know, cell phone and insurance, and like maybe a car payment.
Perfect.
So it afforded me a lot of time just to go and dirt bag around and live this kind of weird nomadic life, but still be a respectable member of society as a firefighter / paramedic. I don't know. I would love to go to Russia just because.
Yeah.
I think the steelhead project that Justin Miller from the Fly Shop is doing right now it's probably the most remote, untouched region of one of the most untouched regions for fly fishing destinations that we, you know, for anadromous fish, I guess, you know, you could do jungle stuff, but
right.
You know, that's it. That would be probably the thing.
Yeah. That's
you
it.
know,
that's it. That's cool. Hey, we are. I'm gonna respect your time, Matt, here, and try to cut this off a little bit. I love these conversations because I had a bunch of questions, and I don't think I've even asked you one that was on. You know, we've just been kind of chatting here, so it's been. This is the best for me. But before we get out of here, I just want to check in with you. Well, let's finish up the 222 first. Resources. If we take us back to the Trinity, what would be a couple of good resources? That could be like book, magazine, online, website. Anything that comes to mind that could help somebody if they're going to that river and they haven't caught a steelhead yet? Where would you direct them?
So, man, I mean, as far as like books and stuff like that I don't check out a lot of books. I personally just go and explore.
Yeah. So you're not doing the online. You're not going online to a specific site or website or group or anything like that and getting some information. You're just kind of going out and doing it.
Yeah, because I don't always trust like if you go online, like to forums and stuff like that. Yep. Like I've been burnt really bad, and it's like, you know, and I don't want to like call, you know, I'm not like saying anybody's name specifically, but like you see a guy and, you know, you look at the forum thing and it's like, how do you gauge this guy's beta? And oh, dude, this guy has 6,000 posts.
Right.
Wow. This, you know, that dude could be the biggest keyboard jockey.
Exactly.
And like the guys that don't ever post and don't have an Instagram account and don't do social are like some of the fishiest dudes out there.
Yeah, they're the ones. They're the ones you need to find.
Yeah. So, for me, like for resources, if guys wanted to come and get the most up-to-date information, you know, and all of the, and their shops, right?
Yeah.
Like,
what is the closest shop?
So we have the fly shop in Reading, and like a ton of the guys are going to be over there. They're going to be fishing on their days off. They're super forthcoming with information.
Yep.
And probably like the grand pumbaa of like all swing fishing on the Trinity is the Trinity Fly Shop.
Oh, there you go.
And Herb has been over there being a two-handed guru for that river for longer than I've probably been a spay caster, right? Like,
perfect.
And, you know, and again, super specialized patterns for the Trinity. Both shops are going to have everything that you need. And their teams are going to give you like all of the information, and, you know, cause they just have boots on the ground over there, right? Like if they tell you that this creek blew out and don't go here, like I'd respect that unless you wanted to go fish really murky, blown out water. Because our weather systems won't always affect the whole river system, if that makes sense. Like it could blow out at mile like 30 or something, you know, like whatever it is. So
yeah. That's perfect.
But yeah, I would just
perfect.
Support those guys and see what they know.
Yeah, no, that's a perfect answer. That's two amazing resources. The fly shops obviously is the place to go. So cool, man. Well, how about with what you have going? You've got, you know, a bunch of companies and all this work here. What in the next 6 to 12 months, anything new we can expect from any of the companies you're working with? You want to give a shout out to, or yourself personally?
Yeah, I mean, well, nothing's really launching, I think, until like this is the weirdest year ever, right?
Oh, right.
Like,
yeah. Has everything paused? Has everybody, because of the COVID thing, has everybody kind of paused things like when they're launching new products?
I have not, personally. And everybody seems to kind of just be going like, no, we're going to move forward. We're going to get product out there. And, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to be a weird way that I think this is going to be the year of like social media launches, right? Because IFTD, like the International Fly Tackle Dealer Show, got canceled.
Oh, it's canceled.
Yes. And, so that's kind of like where we roll it out, you know, like here's all the new stuff. We're not going to have that this year.
Yeah. Are they going to roll out kind of a virtual kind of whatever?
Yeah. I mean, you know, sales meetings are canceled. You know, everything's going to a Zoom meeting. It's just kind of different. But yeah, I mean, over at Loon, I think, you know, everything, I'm like in my brain, I'm like right now it's so weird because I'm working on 2022.
Oh, right.
I'm already working on next year's products to be fished this year and tested for over time so that I make sure that they're good.
That's a good question, Matt. For I just think because this comes up occasionally. I think Echo and, you know, we've talked about this before, but, you know, on the products, it seems like, especially with the fly rods, right? This is always a thing where some companies come out with a new rod every year. Some companies say, you know what, we got a good line. We're not going to come out with a new rod every year or two. I mean, how do you see it with this stuff? Because you're the man, you're doing this for Loon. Do you see like, you know, you've got this product that's working really great. Are you always, you know, kind of upgrading that, changing it, having to come out, feel like you always have to come out with something new every year?
No, and I'm super blessed because like my rod companies and my reel companies are totally on the same brainwaves as me. Like, they don't just turn stuff over. Like with with Echo, they'll probably see like a 5-year lifespan of a rod.
Exactly.
And, you know, unless it becomes so apparent that there's better technology out there, we're not just going to paint something as a bright new color and change the taper 10% or something, you know, the blank or the mandrel. Same thing with Scott, you know, like Radian's in its 8th year and it's still one of the best selling trout rods or fly rods out there. How do you beat that? Like what world do you go, I'm going to go just trash that. We got to do a new one.
No.
You know, like I dig letting things marinate, you know, it's like flies. Like, and when I guide, I tell guys that want to cast all the time, I'm like, dude, the fish are not in the air, you know?
Yeah.
So you gotta let it soak a while. So that's kind of my philosophy on, you know, products too. If something sits for a few years at the bottom of Loon's category, or it's fallen way out of vogue, unfortunately, there are going to be guys who are bummed that we got rid of something. But at the end of the day, it's like we're putting something better back out there.
Yep.
So yeah,
Perfect.
no, I don't know. There should be. I can't really divulge any of the cool new stuff, unfortunately. There's just. I hate to say it, but unfortunately, I just feel like there's too many variables in the world right now, like especially with the COVID thing. Like if something happened and like we had to go on quarantine again and it shuts down business, and then internationally, even, like things could it could get weird. I don't really foresee that happening, but it's a variable that I would take into account.
Yeah, I hear you, man. I think we're all kind of now coming back, to we're trying to restart the country, right? Everybody's kind of getting back into a normal thing. But yeah, I mean, this fall, we could, who knows, be back on lockdown, right?
Yeah. And I mean, for me, the last 3 weeks, I felt like I've done 3 months worth of work in 3 weeks, and like finishing up my computer work and like emails and order stuff like at 11:30 or 12 o'clock at night. Just because everybody reopened and everybody wanted, it's like, hey, rivers are open, and everybody just mass exodus, and it's one of the first times in a long time that I've seen there's a shortage on fishing equipment.
Yeah.
So, and it's not just fly guys, it's my buddies over on the conventional side too, that are also, like, dude, yeah, no, you can't get that product anymore.
No.
We're waiting.
Just like try to get toilet paper off of the roll from the store, right? You can't. You got to go in there early if you want to get your toilet paper and stuff, right? It's kind of funny.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. All right. Hey, Matt. Hey, I'll let you get out of here. I just wanted to. It's loonoutdoors.com if they want to find you. And what's your Instagram? What's your handle there?
So my Instagram is Callies23.
Okay. Perfect.
So it's just SO in front of my last name, which was my name from being a fireman, because I'm originally from Southern California. Yep. And that's just what guys called me.
Gotcha. Perfect. Yeah, and I wanted to dig into that to hear how you took it from the firefighting into fly fishing, but maybe we'll have to leave that down the line if we get you back on and chat about it. But yeah, Matt, hey, thanks for coming on. I appreciate this conversation has been a lot of fun. I know we maybe didn't dig into some of the product stuff as much, but like I said, if we can maybe check in later with you and do a follow-up episode, that'd be great. But yeah, thanks for sharing the good conversation.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Okay. We'll talk to you later. So there you go. If you want to find all the show notes with all the links we covered, just go to wetflyswing.com/144. I'm looking for another person to head over this February to the Yucatan for a big saltwater trip, for heading out for the Big Four. This is going to be an amazing trip set up by Got Fishing. Looking for 2 more people to join the trip, so you can send me a message directly if you're interested. Dave@wetflyswing.com, and I'll get you hooked up with some info and give you some details. Thanks again today for stopping by to check out the show. I'm looking forward to catching up soon. Hope to maybe see you on the river or online.
Thanks for listening to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show. For notes and links from this episode, visit wetflyswing.com. And if you found this episode helpful, please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes.